Hey bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the top 5 books that I read over the winter. This winter wrap-up is quite a bit late. It is currently mid-April when I'm filming this, and it'll probably be late April by the time it goes up. But I love doing these videos. If this is the first winter wrap-up of mine that you've seen, basically I go over all of the books that I read in the last season. So what I consider to be winter is going to be covering December 2020, which I know is kind of weird, January 2021, and February 2021. So I'm going to put all of the books that I read in those 3 months in a ranking order, and I'm going to say them from the ones that I least enjoyed to the ones that I most enjoyed. And as I get into my top 5 books, I will go more in depth into those books and talk about why I loved them so much and why they were my favorites out of all the ones that I read during the season. I will also link my monthly wrap-ups where I talked about these books down in the description box, so if you want more information on some of the books that I don't go in depth into, you can check those wrap-ups out. And of course, I will also have timestamps down below for the different parts of the video so that you can jump to the parts of the video that you're most interested in hearing about. Okay, first, just a quick little overview of my rating statistics. I read a total of 14 things in the winter, which is fairly average for me. This is how my ratings panned out, and I'm pretty happy with it. You'll see there's a lot of 4 stars and a decent amount of 5 stars. I always want the majority of the things that I read to be 4 stars, so I'm pretty happy with this. I only had 1 2-star read. I had 2 3-star reads. I had 8 4-star reads and 3 5-star reads. And none of the books that I read over the winter were rereads. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with my least favorite and list them up to my most favorites, my top 5. So at the very bottom of the list, I have a book that's not even actually a book. It was a screenplay, and that was The Borgia Apocalypse by Neil Jordan, which I gave 2 stars. It was my 1 2-star read. And then getting into my 3 stars, out of the 2 3-star reads that I had, the one that I liked less was Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. And then the one that I liked more was City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. Okay, moving on to my 4-star reads. I had 8 of them, 2 of which I had to include in my top 5, so trying to parse out some of these was really difficult. But my least favorite 4-star book was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, followed by The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson, followed by Rogue Protocol, and then Exit Strategy. I liked Exit Strategy just a little bit more than Rogue Protocol. And then I have Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. And then the last 4-star book that I had before I get into my top 5 is 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. Okay, so that brings me to my top 5. I still have 2 4 stars to talk about, and out of those 2, the one that takes the 5th place spot is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. So if you don't know, I am a pretty big Brandon Sanderson fan, so it might be a little bit surprising to see him this low on the list, or that I gave one of his books 4 stars. I mean, I still thoroughly enjoyed this. This was a solid 4-star read. Elantris is one of his older books. It's an adult high fantasy. I think this book is really great for beginner fantasy readers or people who are still early in their Sanderson journey. I think you can still read it, if you're more of an advanced fantasy reader. It's just not as nuanced as some of his later works. I think the world and the magic are super interesting, which I think of all of Sanderson's books. So those are probably my favorite parts. I think the characters, they weren't quite as nuanced as I'm used to seeing with Sanderson. And in some ways, they were kind of like character archetypes of characters that I could see different versions of in his later works, which was kind of cool to see, honestly. But just go into this knowing that it's one of Sanderson's earlier works. But I still really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it. I think the magic and disease thing going on in this book is really interesting because the people who have this curse sort of are basically zombies. They're decaying and kind of already dead, but they're not dead because they can move around and stuff. And just the whole idea behind this story is really fascinating. There was a point where I got emotional, I shed a couple of tears. The ending, the Sanderson part of it was really fun. So yeah, there was a lot that I loved about this book, and I'm really glad that I read it, and I'm super excited to read more of Sanderson's earlier stuff because I'm definitely going to try to make my way through more of the Cosmere now that I'm like such a fan of the Stormlight Archive books, and obviously I really enjoyed the Mistborn trilogy as well, so I definitely want to read more Cosmere, more Sanderson in general, and I'm really glad that I checked this one off my list. I knew I wanted to read Elantris sooner rather than later because it is one of his earlier works. I know I didn't say a whole lot about the plot, but I do think this one is fun going into without knowing much. And honestly, I'm just really here to tell you why I enjoy these books and not necessarily go in depth into the plot. Okay, the other 4-star book that made it into my top 5 is Cibola Burns by James S.A. Corey. This is the 4th book in the Expanse series. If you don't know, I've been trying to make my way through the Expanse books, which are adult science fiction books, because the 9th and final book in the series is coming out later this year, so I'm trying to get caught up so I can read that one when it comes out. So this is the 4th book, and I really enjoyed this installment in the Expanse series. This is like a space opera series. You have like a cast of reoccurring characters with a lot of new secondary characters introduced with each book, but then you also have secondary characters that make like little guest appearances in the later books, so that was really fun. For example, in this book, I realized at some point that one of the more main characters in this book was a character that we had gotten to know in the first book, and I had kind of like forgotten that he was in there. And then there's some other characters, like minor characters, that reoccur in the storyline, which I think is a lot of fun. These books have a lot of action and are kind of hard to put down, at least for me. I did listen to the audiobook. I've listened to most of these on audio, and I really enjoyed the narrator. I don't actually know if it's the same narrator, but I've always enjoyed the audiobooks of the Expanse books. I really enjoyed the location setting of this book, which I can't really talk about too much because it's the 4th book in the series, but there's a lot of like a scientific aspect, like there's scientists involved who are trying to like study something biological, and I have a background in biology, so I found all of that really fascinating. I really enjoyed all the character dynamics and the action at the end and some of the mystery things that were revealed that have to do with like the wider world and plot, and it was a really good time. Definitely more of a 4.5 that I rounded down. I just didn't quite love it as much as another Expanse book that I will be talking about later in this video. But yeah, it wasn't quite my favorite Expanse book. It was a 4.5, but I ended up deciding to round it down to 4 instead of rounding it up to 5. There was just something about the ending that fell a little bit flat for me. Just wasn't quite as, I don't know, exciting at the end as I wanted, but it was still a really good ending. So I really enjoyed this 4th installment in the series. I haven't read the 5th one yet, but I'm super excited about picking that up hopefully next month. Okay, now moving on to my 5-star reads. My least favorite 5-star read is another Expanse book. That's Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey, and that is the 3rd Expanse book. So for me, the enjoyment of each of these books has been, I enjoyed the 3rd one the best, and then the 4th one, and then the 2nd one, and then the 1st one, I believe. It's hard to keep it all straight, but I think the 3rd one, they were getting progressively better, and the 3rd one was my favorite. The 4th one, I liked a little bit less than the 3rd one. So yeah, 3, 4, 2, 1. Anyways, I thoroughly enjoyed the 3rd installment in the Expanse series. This one I felt like had a lot of surprises and a lot of action. Like they all are kind of like action-y. I think that's why it makes such a fun TV show, which I have been watching a little bit. I think I'm in the 3rd season of the TV show. Maybe it's the 2nd. I don't know. I don't really pay close attention. But I am thoroughly enjoying the TV show, especially now that I have the context of the books. They do make changes in the TV show, but I don't mind that. But anyways, the 3rd installment of the Expanse series had a lot of action, and I really enjoyed all of the relationships. I mean, it's really hard to talk about because it's, you know, the 3rd in a series, but I really liked it, and I liked it the best. It's been my favorite so far. One of the characters that's introduced in this book I really enjoyed, and just the action at the end of this book, it was just a crazy time. There were constantly things happening that I was just like, what is going on? It did maybe have a slow start, but I think around 25% in, something crazy happens, and then from there, I just felt like it was bam, 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 all the way through to the end, and I really enjoyed like the climax and the way that it ended, and that's why it's my favorite Expanse book so far, just based on my enjoyment of it. So I'm really enjoying the Expanse series. I know they're not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm having a lot of fun reading them, so I'm super excited to read more Expanse in the next few months. Okay, and then my second favorite 5-star read that I read in the winter was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is an adult high fantasy. It is the first book in a series, and I had so much fun reading this. So the world in this book is inspired by like pre-Columbia, and I really enjoyed like the magic and the gods. There's animal companions, like these really big crows. I just think the world is so cool. Oh, and also there were like sirens, I think. I don't know. That was really unexpected. We only got a glimpse of that, but there's just so much more that I want to know about this world. There's religion, there's politics. I really enjoyed the main characters. There were a couple of the main characters that I liked less than a couple of the others, but overall I really enjoyed the characters. There's a slow burn romance. The opening of this book was kind of shocking. Like, it definitely hooked me from the very beginning. I will say it is definitely a setup book. Like, it leaves you with a lot of questions at the end. There is a bit of a story arc. It's not just totally like nothing. It's very character focused. Like, there's not a whole lot of plot, but I was immediately drawn in from the very beginning because I thought the characters were super interesting and the world was super interesting, so I didn't really care that there wasn't a whole lot of action or plot going on, but I just was totally pulled in and wanting to know what was going to happen next. So I think some of the downsides of this book are that it is mostly a setup book, and then also the ending. The ending was very abrupt and kind of like in the middle of a climax. Like, it's not quite in the middle of a climax, but everything that happens at the end happens like kind of fast. And then you're just like, wait, that's it? It definitely leaves you on a cliffhanger, which I typically don't like. Like, I usually hate when books do that, and that kind of ending can ruin a book for me. For whatever reason, it didn't ruin this book for me. I'm just like dying to get my hands on the next book in the series, which doesn't even have a release date yet, which is very frustrating. But I think that that ending is not going to work for a lot of people because it is so abrupt. But for me, the world building and the characters and the things that they were going through were interesting enough for me to thoroughly enjoy this and still give it a 5-star rating. Okay, and then my favorite book that I read in the winter should not be a surprise to anyone, but also I read it way back in December, so it might be a surprise because it's like, oh yeah, I forgot you read that in the winter. But that is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which is the 4th book in the Stormlight Archive series, which is an adult high fantasy series that I have been loving so much. I binged the series like in the second half of last year in preparation for Rhythm of War coming out, and Rhythm of War is my favorite out of the series so far. There were so many world building reveals that were mind-boggling, mind-blowing. The characters are going through so much. There's a lot of mental health representation in this series, and I just really feel for some of these characters. There are characters that are frustrating, but honestly, mostly it's like the world and the mystery behind how the magic works and trying to piece together all these puzzles that I really enjoy, but the characters are fantastic too, and it was such a good time. This book made me cry so much. I don't think I've really cried that much in the other Stormlight Archive books. I think I've teared up a few times reading some of the other books. But this book, it made me sob for a good chunk of it. I did do some book diaries for a lot of the Stormlight Archive books, but I did book diaries for Rhythm of War, one for each part. The book is split into 5 parts. So I will link that for you guys if you are interested. There are spoilery videos, so do not watch those videos if you haven't read or at least started the book. But I just started editing my part 5, the finale book diary, which I think will go up before this video, but there are so many tears in that video. I'm a little embarrassed to put that on the internet, but I think anyone who is invested enough in the series to watch a book diary will probably appreciate the tears and me being vulnerable like that. But there were so many things about this last part of this last book. It's not the last book, but the last book that's out right now, that just really got me in the feels and broke my heart, and I cried a lot. And so there was no way that I could not give it 5 stars, and there was no way that it could not be my favorite book that I read in the winter. Also, if you have read this book and want to know or like see more spoilery thoughts, not just from me, but from other people, we did do a World Hoppers live stream where we talked about spoilers after we had all finished reading it, and that was a lot of fun. That video definitely got a bit heated, a lot of emotions running high in that live stream. So that was a lot of fun, and I will link that for you guys for those of you who haven't seen it yet and are Stormlight fans and have read and loved, hopefully loved, Rhythm of War. I know not everybody who's read Rhythm of War loved it, but I sure did. It was my favorite thing that I read in the winter, and I don't know when I'm going to read another book that makes me feel like that. Alright guys, those are the things that I read over the winter. Let me know down in the comment section if you have read any of these and what you thought of them, or let me know maybe what your favorite book that you read in the winter was. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.